And where's the economic fall statement? And it's supposed to be released in November. And the question back and forth is quite funny between Freeland and the reporter who's asking about it. And it's a little insulting if you're a Canadian person who pays into all this stuff. But the actual exchange itself is funny. So I'll show that to you. Romania annulled a presidential election without any real explanation, and I'll show you that. Waterloo Regional District School Board Director is out for being crazy. Well, the reason that he was removed is not evident yet, so you can speculate all you like. So in my opinion, too long. He was in the position too long, and he should have been fired years ago. The truth about the GST giveaway: is this lining Galen Weston's pockets? Why is Jagmeet Singh okay with this GST giveaway to grocery store CEOs? Unbelievable stuff. I'll show you that, because the reality of the GST giveaway is that the grocery stores can change their prices to counter the GST giveaway. And JD Vance is weighing in on churches burning and his pal Jayan Giovanni creating an initiative in the Canadian government. So I was right yesterday. They're grooming Jayan Giovanni to be a bigger role in the Conservative Party and maybe, I don't know, ambassador to the United States. Who knows? Lots going on, lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We have to start with our grab bag of governance because it's quite robust. And Nick says the government of Canada is doing certain things. Here are the bills they're pushing to gain control completely over Canada in a very authoritarian, Orwellian kind of way. And I'm adding a lot of that. He's just got the bills listed. He says royal assent, things that have already happened. The Order in Council gun grabs, C-21 gun grab, and Bill C-11 and C-18, the news censorship and general censorship of the internet. And then on the way, our Bill C-293, which is the pandemic globalist bill. The Bill C-63 is the Online Harms Act, the Online Harms Bill. C-210 or S-210, which is a Senate bill, is digital ID. S-275 is bank reform. Bill C-65 is election changes. They backed down on changing the date of the election to hand over pensions to unelected nearly two-termers, right? And C-40, judicial overreach, justice overreach. Do Canadians want this? Nobody wants this. Absolutely nobody wants this. And yet we are, it seems, powerless to stop it, unfortunately. Andrew Coyne, apparently we've surrendered the Arctic to the United States because we are incapable of defending it. And so it's interesting what's going on. Andrew Coyne notes this. He says the former Canadian Arctic, Ottawa unveils a new policy for what it now calls the North American Arctic. It's our Arctic. Everybody's Arctic in North America. You want some Arctic? We've got Arctic for you. Robert Fife says Canada unveils new policy for what it now calls North American Arctic in the Globe and Mail. So here is part of this article. Canada will begin security talks with allies to protect the Arctic from military and economic challenges posed by Russia and China under a new Arctic policy unveiled Friday that also includes working more closely with the United States. Could we work more closely with the United States? I don't think so. Here's complete control. How much more closely would you like to be the United States? They pay for it, and they are the ones putting the assets in place to defend the place. So Foreign Affairs Minister Mel Joly worked on the strategy for more than a year as Canada and allies bordering the Arctic grapple with China gaining a major foothold in the region through its alliance with Russia. They're also dealing with climate change as melting ice opens up new shipping routes and mineral exploration. The policy introduces a new framing of the Arctic. It calls the region the North American Arctic 13 times in the document, and an apparent stress of how important cooperation with the United States and its military will be. As the Globe and Mail reported last year, China, although it has no territory fronting in the Arctic, is rapidly building up its presence in the region through Russia. Moscow is facing a severe budget crunch from its military assault on Ukraine and increasingly relies on Beijing and unprecedented levels of Chinese corporate and state investment to develop the area. China's northernmost tip is still located 1,500 kilometers from the Arctic. The threat to Canada's security are no longer bound by geography, they say. Change is accelerating rapidly. The non-Arctic states, including China, are also seeking great influence in the governance of the Arctic. Ms. Joly said in the forward to the strategy. To respond, Canada must be strong in the North American Arctic and require deeper collaboration with its greatest ally, the United States. Canada must also maintain strong ties with its 5 Nordic allies, which are also all NATO members. It continues, Miss Jolie is promising to name an Arctic ambassador and set up consulates in Anchorage, Alaska, and Nuuk, Greenland, while also working to strengthen First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities as the High North is open to mineral development. So interesting stuff going on there. The renaming of the Arctic from the Canadian Arctic to the North American Arctic. Weird. It's interesting stuff. Very, very intriguing moves from our incompetent foreign minister, right? Weird, very strange. Here is a very concerning situation happening in the House of Commons. Apparently, Sukh Dhaliwal intimidated Josh, or not Josh Ryan himself, but Josh Ryan's highlighting this, intimidated the MP who's about to speak and told him that he better watch out, or that he'll be effed up. So that's pretty effed up. Here is this whole exchange. It's only 40 seconds. It doesn't take long. Here we go.
A few minutes back, member from Surrey Newton introduced a motion seeking unanimous consent, and I said no. I believe on the way out of this chamber, the member threatened that I will be effed up. So another member also aggressively accosted me in the lobby. I feel that as a member of parliament, I should be able to express my opinion, my views freely in the House, and I should not be felt threatened by any words or actions of my fellow members.
Thank the honourable member for bringing that forward.
So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but apparently this guy says Sukh Dhaliwal is in deep trouble. So you're not allowed to threaten other members of the House of Commons, other MPs for saying no to your motion, right? Like, and if you want unanimous consent and don't have it, but you can intimidate your way there, I guess, by hook or by crook, right? Whatever way you can pull it. So Max Fawcett is saying that he's dismissing Jayan Giovanni's concerns about Christians being targeted, Christian churches being burned. And so Giovanni, and I've reported on this earlier this week, he says, I'm sounding the alarm. We must protect Christians in Canada from governments and corporations abusing their power in our country, and from anti-Christian bigotry. Okay, so they're trying to protect Christians and allow them to practice their faith in Canada in a way that is unafraid, etc. And Max Fawcett says, so much of contemporary conservatism revolves around cultivating and validating a sense of victimhood in groups that aren't actually victims. So he's dismissing this whole concern around the targeting of Christians, the burning of churches, and all of that kind of stuff. J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, says Canada has seen a number of church burnings in recent years, thanks to anti-Christian bigotry. All over the world, Christians are the most persecuted religious group. Jamil is speaking the truth. Shame on journalists who refuse to see what's obvious. So it's interesting that, Jayan Giovanni is friends with J.D. Vance, and it's interesting that the vice president-elect is taking note of Canada and weighing in on this kind of stuff. It's interesting. Eva Chippick responds or quotes J.D. Vance, and she says, Vice President-elect Vance is calling out the lies and fake media in Canada. It's embarrassing that leaders of other countries have to call out and shut down the lie for us. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. City News in Kitchener is reporting G1 Chinkaka. I'm terribly slaughtering his name, but I don't really care. Is no longer the director of education at the Waterloo Regional District School Board. Yay! This is a win for anybody with sense. Honestly, it is a good thing that he is no longer the director of education. He was harmful to kids. I think that he was abusive to kids. Blueprint for Canada says the Waterloo Regional District School Board has just announced that the insufferably woke G1, that guy, is no longer the director of education. The reason for his sudden departure is currently unknown. What a tragic loss for our children. What nonsense. So people were remembering that he cut out Christian holidays and didn't want women referred to as women, but instead menstruators, and all sorts of really, really strange, very, very strange things. And so I'm glad that he's gone, and he was there too long, and he should have been removed earlier. Here's Payman, and this is a really interesting three-thread series, and this guy's being interviewed by Payman, and he's alleging, this is the thread that kind of goes through, well, Payman says part one of this three-part thread will focus on the actual crime, part two will focus on Mr. Reese's attempts to blow the whistle, and part three will focus on how they tried to destroy Mr. Reese. And it's really, I mean, it's a very interesting situation, what's going on here. And, well, here it is. Mr. Kirk Reese has a very compelling story implicating the Canadian Armed Forces and, by extension, the federal government in a tax and theft and money laundering scheme. I wish to help him out by capturing this story in an easy-to-follow thread. Fundamentally, what happened was they changed the way you submit payment for people in Reese's job. And people in Reese's job are Canadian Rangers, fill out a special payment thing, and they submit it. And the government said, no, that's not how you do it. What we want you to do instead is submit a blank one. We'll fill it out for you and then pay you. Weird, right? So here we'll pick it up here. And so the fraud is explained in the following series of tweets here. Normally, operating procedure for Rangers would go like this. Mr. Reese would carry out the work. He would fill out an equipment usage rate pay form. He would sign it. Command would review it. Command would sign off and pay Mr. Reese. This is how Command insisted it should work instead. Sign and submit the blank EUR form. Go to work. Command fills out the form and pays out. Weird. With this system, where this system can be abused is when Command turns around and says they misplaced an EUR form and requests that a new EUR form be signed. By 2013, Mr. Reese started suspecting they were pocketing money in cash. As one example, while on training in Vancouver for patrol management, the Rangers would discuss how the EUR was open to abuse and fraud. Another red flag was the Stanley Mission boat exercise, where 33 people were asked to sign blank EUR forms, but only 8 were sent on the mission. This means 25 signed EUR forms that could have been abused. Or, alternatively, it's also possible that the money was used to finance Tammy Seasonal's Liberal Party campaign. Again, this is speculation. Other possible motives, so lists other possible ways the money could have been used. Mr. Reese's section, 10 people, brought these issues to him, and he reported it to Sergeant Major Michael Gillard. Gillard gave him $4,000 in cash and said, the money is between you and I, at which point he went to Sergeant Jim Searson, who seemed to be aware of the bribe. Okay. And then in September 2018, Sergeant Searson informed a group of 50 Rangers that Prime Minister Trudeau had promised his wife, Chief Tammy Cook Searson, $16 million for a wellness center. While the promise of funds for the wellness center was above board, Sergeant Jim Sarson later told Mr. Reese that the promise of funds and his wife's candidacy was contingent on him staying on as patrol commander. Mr. Reese suspected that every patrol commander prior to Sergeant Searson was aware of the money laundering taking place and was either involved or looked the other way, and Sergeant Searson simply carried on in this tradition. 4CRPG was constitutionally required to hold an election for all positions, 4 section leaders, 1 patrol commander, and 1 section commander. However, Sergeant Jim Searson canceled the election for all positions. It didn't follow proper procedure governing where to hold the elections and with all the men in attendance, and made up a new vote to get Mr. Reese expelled from the Rangers. With no election for patrol commander, Sergeant Searson was allowed to remain at his post. Later, Lieutenant Colonel Russell Meads led an investigation into himself and Sergeant Searson, where he reached the determination that the entire election was to be null and void, and it did not follow proper procedure. Before the most unusual election, Sergeant Major Michael Gillard had emailed everyone a copy of the Electoral Constitution and informed Sergeant Jim Searson that he's responsible for effective execution of that election. Mr. Reese takes this to mean that Gillard was both clearing his hands of this and putting Searson on notice that he was violating the Rangers' governing constitution. And then the second part of the thread is how he tried to blow the whistle. And he went to everybody. He went to members of parliament. He went right up the chain of command. He went to the prime minister's office. Everybody said, basically, this isn't my jurisdiction. I can't do anything about this. Here's an example. Dear Mr. Rees, this letter is in response to the reprisal complaint you made to the Office of the Public Sector Integrity Commission on March 12, 2019, pursuant to Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. My office has concluded its review of the information you provided, and the purpose of this letter is to inform you of the reasons why an investigation will not be commenced. In your submission, you allege that management of the Department of National Defence, including Lieutenant Colonel Russ Meads and Patrol Commander Jim Saracen, as well as Canadian Rangers, took reprisal measures against you as defined in paragraphs 2A, C, D, and E of the Act for having made a protected disclosure. More specifically, you allege that several reprisal measures were taken against you, including threats to yourself and your family, harassment, suspension from your employment as a Canadian Ranger, and being dishonorably discharged from the Canadian Armed Forces. After careful review of the information you provided in your reprisal complaint, I regret to inform you that my office does not have jurisdiction over the Canadian Rangers, since they're part of the Canadian Armed Forces and thus not captured by the definition of public servant as set out in the Act. In fact, Submission 19.1.1 of the Act provides that a public servant or a former public servant can file a reprisal complaint with my office. A public servant is defined in subsection 2.1 of the Act as any person employed in the public sector, every member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and every chief executive. Subsection 2 of the Act is clear, however, that Canadian Armed Forces are not included in the definition of public sector. So he was trying to blow the whistle to anybody who would listen. He, again, went right up to the Prime Minister, the PMO, the Office of the Prime Minister, and they responded and said, this is not our jurisdiction. On behalf of the Prime Minister Trudeau, I would like to acknowledge your receipt of your correspondence. At the outset, please let me thank you for your service. I recognize why you have written to the Prime Minister. I sympathize with your situation, the situation you describe, and realize that this has been distressing for you. However, the matter you raise falls within the purview of the Honourable Harjit Sajjan, Minister of National Defence. I've therefore taken the liberty of forwarding your email to the Minister Sajjan for his information and consideration. Do you think anything happened? No, of course nothing happened. Nothing ever happens because, well, the fraud benefits the Liberals. And so what happens is somebody fills out the 25 extra reports to get paid. That money gets pocketed and funneled into a campaign somewhere. And it looks like it's just Canadian Rangers work, right? And nobody's any the wiser, especially if you've got people in positions who are locked into those positions for $16 million wellness centers and other bribes that make it worth their while, right? To take the risk and to shut down any questions about it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's very interesting. Here's Melissa. She says, Quebec is looking at ways to ban prayer in public places, including parks. And so on one side, you think maybe bad because there's a war on Christianity across Canada and indeed across the broader West. People in the United Kingdom have been arrested for praying on street corners. And I believe people in Toronto have also been arrested for street praying, et cetera, et cetera. What Quebec is going after is people taking over parks, people taking over public streets to pray. He says, go into places that are designated for that. So it's interesting. Here's that 20 or so seconds. Here we go.
Including using the notwithstanding clause to ban public prayers.
You should pray in a place that is for praying, but in parks, public parks or public streets, we'll look at what we can do, but that's not what we want.
Including using the notwithstanding clause.
So that's not what we want, right? We don't want people taking over parks and streets in order to, pray. That's not what we do. That's not how we behave. So how about the economic update? CPAC has got this back and forth. I thought the back and forth was funny. Chrystia Freeland's facial expressions. I don't get it. I don't get the twitchiness. I don't get the nodding, all the weird. She's like, remember Jim Carrey in The Mask and his face was all elastic and stuff? It's kind of like that. It's kind of weird. Anyway, here we go.
My question today is about the fall economic statement. Normally the FES is released in November. It's now December. Is the FES delayed because the deficit is too big? That's my question.
No.
Not too big.
Yeah. Okay, you guys sometimes like short answers. So let me say, when it comes to the fall economic statement, I will deliver a fall economic statement this year. We have had the work of Parliament filibustered for more than 2 months. The regular work of our House of Commons has been blocked. That has consequences. It makes it much harder for our government to do our work. We will deliver a fall economic statement. I'm looking forward to it.
Interesting that she blames Polyev and the filibuster when, I mean, they could just hand over the documents and move on with the work of Parliament, right? And that's the stuff that I talked about at the beginning of the show, the censorship bills, all of that kind of stuff getting in there. That's the kind of focus they want. So interesting. The economic long wave is talking about the interest rate, and they say the odds are now 100% as the hangover from the real estate bubble starts to impact the real economy. The likelihood of the Bank of Canada cutting rates by 0.50 has surged to 99%. Canada's economy remains stagnant while immigration skewing GDP figures and masking the actual size of economic activity. The natural forces of the market can't be defied forever. To regain balance, the Canadian economy must undergo definancialization. Meanwhile, only a tiny fraction of households and businesses are actively deleveraging. So, well, I don't know I'm not exactly sure what his suggestion to deleverage is, but regardless, I think that it's interesting that the Bank of Canada it looks like, according to this guy, going to be forced to lower rates when the United States isn't going to be doing that. So it'll be interesting to watch all of this kind of stuff happen and the fallout of all of it. Not great, I'm saying, but interesting nonetheless. Alberta Leonidas says, question for Canadians. When they don't come to your door to collect your guns, but instead turn off your bank account and your utilities, what do you do? This also applies for people who own Airbnbs or even ICE vehicles, so gas-powered vehicles. When they move on to both of these, they don't have to send police anymore. They can just cut you off, deperson you, right? And do it in a way that they maintain the moral high ground. Well, he was not helping climate change, and now we've prevented him from doing the damage that he was otherwise intended to do, right? And Joe says insurance is how they'll get it all. Your house insurance can be denied if your house is used for illegal activities. It can also be canceled if they cut off your utilities. Your mortgage can be called in for full payment if you cannot protect the property with insurance. Your car insurance is subject to the whims of provincial regulations. Just ask BCers what happened when ICBC refused to insure vehicles that didn't pass air care. So yeah, like if you're on the road and they say, listen, your ICE vehicle, your gas-powered vehicle has to meet these stringent whatever, or you can't drive it. Otherwise, you have to be in a battery-powered car. That'll be relatively easy to police, and the people who are doing it will believe in climate change and say, "This is how we're saving our world. Why are you being a bad person and doing these evil things like driving your car?" Right? Like that's what they want. That's what they want. And I think he's right. There's a guy on Joe Rogan the other day talking about how they're going to use insurance to cripple. Basically, it's unregulated. Insurance is unregulated, and there's no guarantee of insurance. And if you can't get insurance, well, you're kind of screwed, right? And so, not exactly screwed, but like kind of screwed. So it's very problematic, right? Kind of greases the wheels around things. So they're trying to make it as difficult as possible to not comply. Dan says, this is bombshell testimony. The Liberal government ripped out 360 plus pages from the contract of their $8 billion net zero accelerator fund. The Trudeau is preventing Parliament from seeing how $8 billion was spent in the name of emissions reductions with no strings attached. What are they hiding? Yeah, well, they're obviously hiding something. Here's just a little bit of this. Here we go.
Pages were ripped out of the contracts. They were numbered, and there were pages ripped out of the contracts. A total of 360. This is what 360 pages look like. 360 pages are ripped out of these contracts. Now, who ripped them out? Who ripped out the pages out of the contracts?
The department removed information that was deemed commercially confidential in the context of our third-party consultations with the recipients.
So it was the department that ripped out the pages?
The department removed information that was deemed commercially confidential by third-party recipients.
Did the minister know that these pages were ripped out?
The minister would have been made aware of the information that is being provided by to the committee.
So the minister is on purposely ripping out pages of the contracts to hide information from this committee.
The department is doing its is meeting its obligation in terms of meeting its contractual obligations to recipients and its legal obligation vis-a-vis existing statutes to ensure that information that is commercially confidential and could cause prejudice to companies is not released.
Prejudice to companies. What kind of contracts did they sign to hand over this $8 billion to the companies, right? This was very weasel words, very careful words that he was choosing there. George is talking about the United States and their Department of Government Efficiency. Advisor Ron Paul has announced that one of his recommendations will be to totally eliminate foreign aid. Yes, let's do that. That's a good idea. Quote, it's taking money from the poor and middle class in the United States and giving it to the rich in poor countries with a cut to the facilitators in between. It's about time we defunded the dictators all around the world. The billions we send overseas are responsible for the corrupt people remaining in office for so long. Yeah, we should stop it. We should absolutely stop it. I've been banging that drum for a year. Holy smoke. Nothing our foreign policy establishment has done since World War II has benefited us or the world at large in any way. At the end of the show today, I have like 10 or 12 tabs. No, that's not that many. Talking about, well, the broadcast is waking up to the alternate history of World War II, and I'm not talking about, read this alternate fan fiction history of World War II. I'm saying that we've been sold an alternate fan fiction history of World War II, and the real history of World War II is there if you want to look for it. And more people are waking up to it every day. And James Lindsay, shame on James Lindsay. He's come up with this term of woke right, the woke right. Reimagine World War II. And I think he's a gatekeeper. So very, very concerning. But it's interesting if you go back and you look, and at the end of the show today, well, let's see if I can show you. At the end of the show, I've got all of these tabs talking about, here's the broadcast. She says, I was today years old when I learned that Hitler had the Rothschilds properties in Germany seized. Very, very interesting. Here's Peter Hitchens. We won the war, or did we? Right? The Second World War he's talking about, and he makes an interesting case. And so it's very interesting to watch people discuss these things that have previously been verboten. You're not allowed to discuss these things previously, right? It's very interesting now in the context of why are we living a second Weimar situation in the West, and why are we doing it to ourselves? And the answer is, holy cow, did you hear about what actually happened in the Second World War? Elon Musk is responding to Wall Street Maverick? I don't know. And he says regulations are strangling American innovation. If we don't get this under control, our economy will stagnate. Yep. And Elon Musk says strangulation of the nation by overregulation. Yes, that's exactly what they're doing. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful